Welcome to the program. After moving on Labor Party reform and the carbon tax, Kevin Rudd has just one challenge left before he calls the election, and it's the toughest challenge of all. It's the asylum seeker issue. More people have died at sea this week trying to reach Australia. There has been a record number of boat arrivals in recent months and indeed years. Can Kevin Rudd, who did famously warn against a lurch to the right on this issue and did dismantle the Pacific solution, really find an answer to this vexing issue? To look at this and the other fast-moving events of the week in politics, we're joined by Labor MP Stephen Jones, former Liberal MP Ross Cameron, former Press Secretary to Kevin Rudd, Lachlan Harris. He's now co-founder of consumer network One Big Switch, and the Shadow Minister for Employment, Participation, Childcare and Early Childhood Learning, Sussan Ley. Welcome to you all. Let's start on the boats issue. We're expecting the Prime Minister to announce something fairly soon on this. Stephen Jones, what more can be done?
Look, the thing that has to be done is to secure cooperation with our regional neighbours. That means Indonesia, that means Malaysia, and it means ensuring that we have cooperation to ensure that the people who are moving, they're doing the people trafficking through the region.
What does that mean in terms of what's not being done at the moment? Isn't that being done at the moment?
Well, look, the things that the gaps in the process at the moment to ensure that we've got better cooperation, particularly with Indonesia. You know, we've identified Iran as a source country where 1/3 of the people who are coming to Australia by boat are coming from Iran.
So it's saying with Indonesia, stop to those who are coming from Iran and denying them a visa when they come into Indonesia.
Well, look, I don't think you can completely say that a country is prohibited from, people from one particular country is prohibited from entering an airport in another country, but we can say there needs to be a bit more rigour when it comes to the visas that are being granted. We know that there is an issue with Iran. We know that there is an issue with the people who are coming.
What's that issue?
Well, we know that basically we've got a high number of economic migrants coming to Australia by boat via Indonesia, and we know that once they arrive there's a great difficulty because Iran won't take them back. It's not a situation like we have with Sri Lanka, where over 1,000 people who have been determined not to be refugees have been returned to Sri Lanka over the last 2 years. And quite simply, Iran won't take its citizens back, so they are left in limbo. They're effectively stateless.
What you're talking about here is Australia and Indonesia together toughening the approach to those coming from Iran.
That's right. It absolutely has to happen in cooperation with Indonesia, just as a cooperation with Malaysia that the opposition have struck down needs to be put in place if we're to deal with other people movements through the region as well.
Would that make a difference, Sussan Ley?
Look, it might, and it sounds reasonable, David, but the problem is we've heard Prime Ministers Rudd, Gillard and Rudd saying these things for years now, and the Labor Party needs to own the problem that they have created. Spare a thought for our Customs and Navy personnel who I have visited, working off Northern Australia, and the work they have to do, pulling drowned bodies out of the sea. And we know that there are people in the Parliament with goodwill, but we also know that they've failed miserably. I have visited resettlement services in Melbourne and Brisbane. There have been 45,000 illegal arrivals since 2007. There are now 5,000 people coming into this country in effectively community detention every year with no work rights, nowhere to live, no one to support them and no effective future. This is a mess. And
I don't think anyone denies the extent of this. What you're saying here is there needs to be an apology or something.
No, the government needs to own the problem and be prepared to act in a way that achieves the right solution. We were screamed at for having temporary protection visas for years. I can remember when John Howard was Prime Minister being attacked time and time again for the cruelty of TPVs. Look, you had to be tough to get an effective solution, and I don't believe this Labor government can be tough when it really comes to it. They can talk the talk, but they just can't walk the walk.
Can I ask one question about TPVs? How are TPVs going to stop the flow of people coming for Iran? You grant some, let's just work your solution through. People are coming in from Iran. 1/3 of the people who are coming by boat are coming from Iran. You grant them a TPV. How's that going to affect the problem? Because Iran won't take them back. It's not as if, OK, the situation changes in Iran, the TPV has done its work and they send them back to Iran. It won't work.
Well, you're quite wrong about that with respect, OK? What you have to do is stop the people coming, OK? Okay, you have to make it clear
I've just
when
acknowledged
they
that,
sit
Ross.
down. So from Iran, okay, we don't love the Ayatollah. I wouldn't sort of pick Iran as my first place after Sydney to want to live. But there is not, if you look up, human atrocities and Iran in Google, you don't get it. It's not as if the Baha'is and or the Christians or the tiny fragment of Jews that actually still live in Iran. Iran actually has, I think, a Jewish member of parliament. It is not a regime we want to uphold, but it is not a regime which is responsible.
But the point Stephen's making is, once they get here, how is a temporary protection visa going to make any difference if Iran won't take them back?
But the point is, the point, David, is that it must be absolutely clear in the minds of the parents as they rake together the $30,000 they need to begin this journey that there is no nirvana at the other end.
There's no migration outcome.
There's no migration outcome. And everywhere, for example, all over the world, you are seeing this trend. France has just passed laws allowing them to immediately expel anyone who arrives in their country without documents. It's all over. The United States is engaged in a massive internal contortion.
Yeah, but
Iran is a
particular problem, isn't it? Because if they don't accept people back into the country, you can have all the language around this, we'll fly them back, kick them out, expel them. But where do you put them?
Well, look, I can say to you, David, that there's a whole spectrum of measures that could be introduced by a government that had a clear-cut resolution to make it clear to the rest of the world.
Just give us one with Iran. So we've got working this through, because this is your one big thing. Your TP visa is your one big thing that's going to make the difference.
It's not the one big thing. You guys have been fundamentally compromised by an alliance with the Greens.
Let's bring it along.
Your
and I'm not going to ask you to defend what Kevin Rudd did first time around, but look, he did dismantle the Pacific solution, and at the time he won plaudits for it because it was an unpopular policy under John Howard. He did warn against a lurch to the right. What do you think about this pressure on him to offer some sort of apology or acknowledgement that they were mistakes?
Yeah, I think, look, there was first of all, there was certain incidents that kind of, I think, led to some people being very uncomfortable with that situation. They weren't all about migration. It was Australian citizens being locked up for an extended period of time, deported in some cases. There was some incidents where there was a genuine feeling of uncomfortableness. I think Carr and Rudd would argue that it's the problem has changed and now they need a new solution. Now, if they can make that argument, look, they might, they'll have a showing in the election. My view is people are probably willing to listen to Rudd again on this issue, which is a big breakthrough for him. He's probably a lucky break in many senses, but he's going to have to say something pretty big and pretty bold in the next couple of days, I think, to kind of...
What do you reckon he'll do then?
I don't know. Look, I honestly don't know the policy solution. What I would say is everything that Rudd's done since the election has been maybe 2 or 3 degrees hotter than I was expecting, like sort of more bigger, like including the reform stuff. Yeah, so look, I'd be expecting quite a significant move in the next couple of days.
Could he adopt coalition policies, TPVs, turn back votes?
I think they've been making the argument, you've seen Carr leading on it, making a strong case that fundamentally the people who are turning up are in a very different situation now to they were in 2001 through 4. And so I think that is laying the groundwork for a major
But it's not as if that's
move.
just happened. I mean, this has been happening for years. To suddenly say, well, these are suddenly now classified as economic refugees, when clearly they have been for years, is disingenuous. It's as if the Prime Minister is saying, well, I have a whole new situation to deal with and I'm going to do these things. Of course he should adopt coalition policies because they've been proved to work.
The question I've asked you, and neither yourself nor you, Ross, have been able to answer. I've given you one example. 1/3 of the people who are coming by boat are Iranians. You have not been able to answer to me or anybody else how your TPV or any other element of your policy is going to stop that, is going to be a solution to that problem. You have not been able to give an answer to it.
I will give you, if you want to go to the extreme, okay, Christmas Island is 500 kilometres from the archipelago of Indonesia. It's 1,500 kilometres from the mainland of Australia. If you went to the Indonesian government and said, do you want a 50-year lease on Christmas Island?
You're saying give them Christmas Island.
Okay, and in exchange for an undertaking that every arrival on Australian shores will be processed on Christmas Island, okay, you would solve the problem tomorrow.
That's rubbish.
Okay, well, you would not have enough, and if you just built a nice detention centre out, there's only 2,000 people on Christmas Island, principally sort of Australian Chinese. Now, they may have a view about it, but I'm saying to you, if you're prepared to go hard, you can end this tomorrow.
Why would Indonesia want that?
Well, Indonesia's got a massive population.
Christmas Island's going to help?
Well, I can tell you.
What's in it for?
Well, then, if you're saying you're happy to give it away, I mean, I think the biggest problem with that solution is the Australian people may be reluctant to look like we're ceding territory.
Yeah, but I'm asking why Indonesia would possibly want Christmas Island if it's a magnet for boat people.
Well, what it would do is end the boat people. It would be the end of the journey. If we simply announced tomorrow that we had done a deal with Bang Bang Yodo, that he was going to get a 50-year lease on, it's about, I think, 14 by 12 kilometres. It's a beautiful place of great interest to naturalists. There's quite a bit of interesting science taking place there. There's no military or strategic importance to it for us. If you went to the president of a country with, 150 million people and said, you want another piece of land which is not too far away, you can build a beautiful resort on it, you can have a casino if you want. But this is the deal. Okay, you would shut down. If you want to talk about shutting down the people smugglers' business model, Labor has done everything in their powers to create a massive industry of people smugglers.
A superstructure.
And if you want to shut it down, if you want to shut it down, I'm just saying to you that there is a whole spectrum of measures available.
Let's get back to what
and we could shut it down tomorrow.
But in reality, because I don't think either side is going to
David, we
try and sell Christmas Island to the Indonesians.
The disincentive that TPVs provided was no migration outcome. The certainty for the Australian people was that you would not have people released into the community whose health and character were not assured. So at the moment we have 5,000 people arriving in community detention every year under this government. We don't know what their character assessment is. It's been just a tick and flick at best, and we haven't checked on the diseases they might carry for their own health, not just for the Australian
Are you really
people.
going there, Susan?
So no, I'm not going there in a sense.
you are.
I'm not going there in a sense of education.
Has there been a problem?
There's certainly been a problem about character
But
checks.
is there a fundamental difference between someone who turns up in a boat and who turns up on a plane? Is they're more likely to be diseased, are they, if without documents?
Well, we're not talking about the difference between people on planes and boats. We're talking about people who are not being
The
looked
TPV
after.
solution is proposed.
What worries me about this group of people in the community is that they're not allowed to work. They're getting less than New Start. This government, I mean, it talks about New Start for single mothers, but it's got a group of people on community detention that it's not looking after at all.
I think
it doesn't give them enough money to survive.
This is a fair point here, isn't it, Stephen
And it's
Jones?
forgotten them. So my issue is about the welfare of those individuals.
You're very selective
and
about
they've
your
been just neglected.
concerns, Susan.
But just on this point, there are about 16,000, I think, people on bridging visas at the moment. They're not allowed to work. They are paid less than the dole.
Yep.
Are you comfortable with that?
No, absolutely I'm not, and it would be my preference that these people are here and in community, living in the community, they should be able to have some form of work rights. I believe that
So you don't
that's
support,
the appropriate.
you don't support the government's policy?
However, that's when you move from the headline principle and say, OK, what does that look like in practice? You have a significant problem with at least one population group, the Sri Lankans, who are marketing that specific fact to people who were coming to Australia and saying it doesn't matter if you're going to get turned back because you won't meet the refugee status, you'll have earned more money in 9 months than you can earn in 9 years here in Australia. That's worth the trip for you. Now, when you drill down from the slogan and the high-level principle into how does that work, it's like your TPVs with Iranians. Sounds very good at this level, but when you start to drill down about how it actually works with one population group, the slogan falls to bits.
Well,
The slogan or the principle falls to bits, and you've actually got to say what's going to work with this particular group.
I would like one of your... See, I would like to get up and really and give the Indonesians a little bit of a touch-up, and there's no question that a whole range from the airport when they first arrive at customs right through to the local police on the borders where the boats are leaving. There's no doubt there's people in the Indonesian administration getting paid all the way up and down this thing. And there's a part of me that wants to step up and say to President Yudhoyono, come on, you cannot turn around and say we won't cooperate in turning back the boats when a significant proportion of people in the employment of the government of Indonesia, at whatever level, are being paid corrupt payments for this outcome to take place. I would like to say that to the President, but firstly I'd have to admit, and I'd have to say, look, I'm really sorry, we created this whole damn mess. And Kevin Rudd was candidate messmaker number one.
Stephen Jones, just getting back to, though, tougher processing or assessment for Iranians. Again, what difference will this make? If Iran won't take them back, what difference will it make? What do you do with them? You say, OK, you're an economic refugee, as you call them. Then what?
Well, you've got to look at the migration trail, and we know that they are coming to Australia via either Malaysia or Indonesia. That's why, contrary to what you're saying, Ross, actually the best thing you can do is not poke the Indonesians in the eye, but to have a nice diplomatic conversation with them and have a discussion with them. How can we work on this together? Because it's a problem for you if they're coming to Indonesia and they are parked there. It's a problem for us if they are coming to Indonesia as a conduit to coming to Australia. Let's work together to ensure that this population group, which is exploiting both of our systems, let's work together on a solution to
So
this.
it's really at the point of entry into Indonesia that they need to be
I think that has
told
to be.
no and not given a visa.
We have to work with the Indonesians on this, and you can understand their reticence. It'd be like Indonesia coming to us and say, we've got a concern about all these Kiwis who are coming into Jakarta via Sydney. Can you not let them into Sydney? Well, we'd say, well, hang on a moment. We're a sovereign nation,
Stephen,
and we don't get dictated to you about it. So, quite contrary to what you're saying, Ross, and I've seen some retired servicemen saying, I don't think the best way of dealing with the Indonesians on this is to poke them in the eye publicly. It's to sit down and have diplomatic conversations with them to try and get a level of cooperation.
Well, I think where you first need to start is with a resolve to stop the traffic. Okay, now we've had in Kevin Rudd's positions.
Okay,
you actually first need a resolve to do this. Okay, so when Kevin Rudd was sacked by his colleagues, his parting piece of advice was to his party, do not lurch to the right on boat arrivals, which was a message to all of the people smugglers, keep coming, keep coming. Now, you've got Labor in coalition for most of the last term with the Greens, where Sarah Hanson-Young is getting up every day and saying, oh, look, I know it's only 3 people a week who are drowning under this policy, but we would like to see more of it, and this is a really good humanitarian policy. Now, we know that when Kevin Rudd botched the pink bats and 4 young Australian apprentices were electrocuted or incinerated, that program was stopped immediately. But we're very happy to tolerate 2 or 3 women and children drowning in the Straits every week.
You can definitely hear, I think it's interesting, David, since Rudd has come back, there's just that little, there is definitely a sense, a tinge when boats is raised, that it's the kind of, ironically, the kind of life raft, political life raft kind of language, you know what I mean?
That's not fair.
Well, who takes responsibility?
Yeah.
Who of you, which of you guys, well, just the Australian people looking on at this can say, OK, we made this mess. Well, I'm glad somebody does. Somebody has got it. Someone in the ALP will never, Susan's point is right in terms of owning it, right?
You're never going in your voice, mate.
You are never going to. Well, 1,000 people dead is inclined to raise my pulse rate.
Really? A second ago you were defending Iran.
1,000.
1,000 drownings at sea.
I'm just saying that until we can say, all we have to say, and all you guys have to say, if Kevin Rudd would just walk out and say, look, I'm sorry, we made some dumb and naive decisions because we wanted a warm inner glow to reach out to the left who had elected us, and that we were going to dismantle John Howard's wicked, evil policies.
We're going to move
that
on
was
from
a mistake, and we apologise.
Let me just,
then the Australian people would say,
sensational rant, Ross.
Let me just ask this question before we leave the topic. Does anyone here think we should be getting out of the Refugees Convention?
Can I say something about that? I felt very awkward for Julie Bishop's parliamentary colleagues when she made that statement today, because it's the 1-year anniversary to the parliamentary debate on the Malaysian agreement. We required legislation through the parliament to make that agreement work. Speaker after speaker on your side of the House, Susan, got up in tears crying about the fact the reason that we would not vote for this was that Indonesia Indonesia was not a signatory to the UNHCR agreement. Not 12 months later, they're saying that agreement that mattered so much to us that we wouldn't sign the agreement with Malaysia, we're willing to walk away from now.
But what about
How
yourself?
embarrassing.
What about you?
How embarrassing.
Stephen Jones, would you support any exit from the, or suspension from the Refugees Convention?
Well, I think the agreement needs to be looked at, but I don't think we can act unilaterally in this area.
Well, our policy shouldn't be determined by that convention. Our policy should be determined by, number one, stopping the boats, but number two, realising the humanitarian aspect of what has been created by this government, because they always attack us by saying that we don't care about the people and the human dimension, and that is extraordinarily unfair, because we all do care. And having visited, as I come back to, those who've been dumped in communities with no support systems, no money, no future and no visa, and no ability to work and make their lives better. You know, it's an appalling situation that is not being owned by this government. So 1,000 drownings at sea, a humanitarian disaster on our doorstep, and no solution in sight because the government is not able to be tough enough.
We've got that, but just on the convention, in or out?
I'm not saying in or out, David. I'm saying look at it. If it needs looking at, then let's work out a solution through it. It's not.
But is it important to you? Is it important to you that we're in this convention, or does it really matter?
It's important to me that we do the right thing by the international community, and we always have, and we always will.
Okay, Lachie.
I think it would look, you know, I'll kick both sides of politics when I think I think it would be an absolute disgrace if Australia was to leave the convention. You can work within the international community to adopt and change the convention. And look, I don't even know what Rudd or Bishop's policies are, but I think it would be a national disgrace if this country was to decide to walk away from something like that. It's not because I think it's perfect, it's because we work through the international system to fix bodies and to fix documents like that. Mate, there's a whole lot of stuff. If we want to set our sort of like commitment to international law by the US government, then the world is going to be a very different place, and I would not support that at all.
What do you think about the convention, Ross?
Out.
Okay, that was quick enough. We'll take a break and then we'll turn to the carbon tax, the one area where there has actually been a big policy announcement from Kevin Rudd this week. A shift to an emissions trading scheme 1 year earlier, but not everyone's a winner.